My principal area of interest and expertise is the history of medieval England, and I began my career as an economic historian. I got interested in the types of evidence that was available to substantiate the trade links that were taking place. And a lot of the evidence that I was finding exists in court records from the 13th and 14th centuries. As I got into that and started looking at these court records more carefully, I noticed very often that the jurors were named in the documents, and that was a real surprise to me because previous things that I had read about the legal system of medieval England or about the jury system didn't mention anything about the existence of these names of the jurors. As I came across some of these names, I really started wondering about the social backgrounds, the origins, the types of people who were being drafted to serve on these juries, and that led me in a whole new line of research. And so it made looking at the early history of the jury system, and in particular at the early history of jury service, a higher priority for me. The jury system it's very recognizable by modern standards. There are certain features of it that are very similar, are virtually identical to the way things happen today. But there are other features that are not identical. In fact, they're almost diametrically opposed. Among the things that are very similar, I mean, it was very characteristic that there were 12 jurors serving at a time. Jurors took an oath. Jurors were expected to reach a unanimous verdict. On the dissimilar side, one of the things that is most unlike modern juries is that medieval jurors were typically selected because they knew in advance the circumstances of a particular case. Part of the reason for that is that modern trials and the modern judicial system has a lot of other resources that it can call on to provide evidence and to gather evidence and to present evidence in court. In medieval trials were fairly simple. It was generally a plaintiff and a defendant against each other, or an accusation made by the forerunner of a modern grand jury in a criminal case. And then the trial itself was conducted fairly quickly without gathering of evidence outside of the court except for the knowledge that the jurors brought with them into the case. The other way in which medieval juries differ quite significantly from modern juries is that there was a much wider range of decision making that was allowed to medieval juries than is the case in modern times. They did this largely because they were commissioned by the central government to investigate local circumstances and report back to the central government and to update them on conditions as they existed in a locality. One of the reasons that the system worked this way was that medieval governments, unlike modern governments, did not have a large cohort of local officials who were being paid to work on behalf of the government. The central government wanted to figure out ways that it could penetrate into local society and that it could bring people into the plans and the schemes of the central government, could draw on their resources, but in order to do that it needed to have information. And the only way that it could get that information was by asking and by having the collaboration of local people. The court records that I've been working with often give very detailed descriptions of the disputes that the juries were being called in to settle. In one instance, I came across a case in which there was a disputed inheritance, and the person who was claiming to be the legitimate heir to property said that his stepmother had disinherited him by pretending to have a baby that wasn't really her child. When the jury looked into the circumstances, they discovered that this woman did indeed go on a pilgrimage, but that on this pilgrimage she came across a very poor young woman who had just had a baby but could not support the baby, and so she had purchased the child from this poor young woman and then brought it back to her own village and claimed it was her own. And so the stepson was given the property in the end. Regularly, as I'm looking through these documents, I get transfixed by a particular case and try to put myself back into the mindset of the people who are making decisions and behaving in particular ways.